Mama, I swear to God, you take that $185 a night listing down before noon. That room has $14,200 worth of my furniture in it. And I have 847,000 followers who are about to see you have completely lost your mind. That was destiny. That was 9:14 in the morning on October 14th. And it was the 9th time she had called in 22 minutes. I'm Vivienne Okafor. I'm 52 years old. I have worked as a licensed practical nurse at St. Catherine's Medical Centre for the last 19 years, the last 7 of them on the cardiac unit, where I have held the hand of more dying people than most folks will see in a lifetime. And I can tell you with absolute certainty that I know how to stay calm when someone is in genuine distress. I know the difference between panic and performance. And what I heard on the other end of that phone at 9:14 in the morning was not my daughter in crisis. It was my daughter watching her advantage disappear. The laptop was right there in front of me. The Airbnb host dashboard was glowing with a booking request that had come through at 9:11 9 minutes after I hit publish on the listing. Patricia Holloway, she had 47 5-star reviews. And her message was already waiting in my inbox. Designer aesthetic, natural light, perfect for content creators. I'm available immediately and can commit to 7 nights. What's your fastest booking process? Her profile photo showed a woman about my age, maybe a few years younger, with the kind of eye for detail you don't develop by accident. That mattered. That was going to matter. But the phone was ringing again, and I was watching the numbers. Vivienne's mortgage was $1,847 a month. It was due in 16 days. I was 4 months into drawing down the emergency fund that had taken me 11 years to build. The fund that was supposed to carry me if I got hurt. If the hospital downsized. If something went wrong. Instead, it was carrying the half of the mortgage that my daughter had promised to cover back in February and had not paid 1 single cent toward since. Every minute I spent on the phone with her, angry, was a minute I wasn't confirming a booking that brought me closer to recovering the $9,900 she owed. I let that call go to voicemail and kept my hands on the keyboard. The room was exactly as the photographer had shot it the day before. The velvet headboard, the $3,200 one we had carried up the stairs together, laughing on move-in day, when I had said to Destiny that it was too nice for a rental. And she had said, "Mama, it's still my room." And we had both left that sentence hanging there the way you do when you know something is true, but you are not ready to admit what it means. That headboard was the hero photo. The eucalyptus reed diffuser was still plugged into the outlet on the nightstand, its LED cycling slowly from amber to white to amber again. I had left it there deliberately. The photographer had said it elevated the ambiance score by at least half a star, and that $34 detail was going to pay for itself by sunset. The gallery wall was hung with 37 prints. Prints of Destiny's own designs. Mostly, a few that were collaborations with other influencers. The morning light coming through the window caught the matte finish on the frames and made the room look like something from a magazine spread, which was precisely the point. Destiny had designed it that way because everything she did was designed that way. For the angles, for the light, for the moment when a stranger would see it and decide they had to have it, had to be inside it, had to prove through a photograph that they belonged there. The problem was she had not paid the $1,100 she promised to pay to live in it. The phone rang again. 10th call. I logged the time in the notebook. The same notebook where I had been writing down every missed payment since February. Every excuse Destiny had offered. Every screenshot from Miami. Every designer purchase that appeared in her posts while my mortgage sat in the account marked due. The notebook had become a ledger. Now it was becoming a record. My name is Vivienne Okafor. I am not a dramatic person. I do not make claims, and I do not take action in anger. I make plans, I watch, I wait, and when I have gathered enough information to know I am right, I move with a precision that surprises people who have mistaken my patience for weakness. That patience had cost me the entire emergency fund. It had cost me the belief that my daughter was going to honour an agreement we had both signed in front of a notary, which was a line I never thought I would have to draw with my own child. But here we were. Destiny had stopped answering when I asked about the rent. She had started answering with different stories. A brand partnership that was restructuring, a client account that had been frozen, a financial advisor who had recommended she hold onto her cash. Each story came with a request for patience. Each story came with the specific tone of someone who expected to be believed without having to provide proof. And I had obliged her for 4 months. 4 months. And then I had gone to Rochelle, my best friend, the office manager at Calvary Baptist, the woman who had insisted on the notary in the first place, saying, "Just in case, baby, I am not playing with you right now." And I had laughed at her because I could not imagine needing a legal document to enforce an agreement with my own daughter. Rochelle had sat across from me in her office and read through the 47 screenshots I had printed out of Destiny's Instagram posts from the last 6 weeks. And she had said, without looking up, "This ain't hardship, Vivienne. This is a performance." That was when I called Angela Merritt. Angela was a landlord-tenant attorney. Someone Rochelle knew from church. That's someone who had made it clear that she did not charge for a first consultation if it was a friend of Rochelle's. I had walked into her office in my scrubs, still wearing the residue of the morning shift, and I had laid out everything: the agreement, the missed payments, the screenshots, the mortgage payment due in 16 days, the fact that I had spent 19 years taking care of other people's emergencies, and I could not afford to absorb my daughters anymore. Angela had listened. She had pulled up the rental agreement on her screen, zoomed to the 30-day notice clause, and said, "Do you see this? If she does not pay and does not move out, you can evict her legally with 30 days' notice. The agreement is notarized. It is airtight." And I had said, "I don't want to evict my daughter." Angela had given me a look that I recognized because I had given it 100 times to patients in the hospital. The look of someone who knows that you are going to have to do something hard, and you are still hoping that someone else will volunteer to do it for you. Then she had said, "Vivienne, those are not mutually exclusive. You can serve notice and still be her mother, but you cannot stay her mother if you lose your house." That had landed. It had landed the way truth lands when you have been avoiding it long enough that hearing it out loud feels like permission. The 9th call had come at 8:45 that morning. Then the 10th. Then the 11th. I was not counting them out of anger. I was counting them because precision was what separated clarity from panic. and I needed to be clear about what was happening. Destiny was not calling to negotiate. She was calling to intimidate. She was calling to test whether I was actually capable of following through. And every time I let the phone ring through to voicemail, I was giving her the answer. At 8:52, I had hit publish on the Airbnb listing. Room 1B, 1 queen, 1 nightstand, 1 eucalyptus reed diffuser that cost $34 and smelled like someone who had decided their life was a brand. 37 photos. A listing description that I had written myself at the kitchen table the night before, with Rochelle on speakerphone telling me which sentences sounded like a lawyer and which ones actually sounded like an invitation. $185 a night. If I booked 54 nights, I would recover the $9,900. If I booked 70, I would recover it plus the increase in my mortgage due to the late fees. By 9/11, I had the first booking request. Patricia Holloway. 47 5-star reviews. Designer aesthetic, natural light, perfect for content creators. She understood exactly what she was looking at. She was not coming for a place to sleep. She was coming for the curated proof that she could afford to be inside something beautiful. And she was willing to pay $185 a night for the story she would tell about it. I had my hand on the mouse. I had not clicked confirm yet. I was waiting for my own certainty to catch up to what I was doing, which took about 3 seconds. And then I clicked, and Patricia Holloway's booking was live. And the first $1,295 of the $9,900 was now locked in the pipeline. That was when Destiny called for the 12th time. I let it ring. The voicemail chimed. I checked the dashboard. Another booking request was coming through. A repeat guest. Someone named Marcus. Not my Marcus. Destiny's father. But a different Marcus altogether. Someone with 23 reviews. Asking about 3 nights in November. I looked at the calendar. 3 nights in November would bring in another $555. That was 35% of my mortgage due in 16 days. That was $610 closer to the emergency fund being replenished. That was the difference between absorbing a catastrophe and actually recovering from one. I approved the second booking before the 13th call even finished ringing. This is what I want you to understand. I was not angry. Anger is what happens when you feel powerless. And I had just proven to myself that I was not powerless. I had my late mother's house. I had control of the thermostat and the utilities and the rental agreement. I had a room that my daughter had designed to be beautiful. And I had just converted that beauty into capital. I had Patricia Holloway with her 47 5-star reviews coming in for 7 nights. And I had Marcus with his 3 nights in November. And I had the notebook on the table in front of me with every single month of missed payment written down. And I had the email from Angela Merritt confirming that the 30-day notice was about to go out. Certified mail. And I had a mortgage that was due in 16 days. And an emergency fund that was not going to absorb it anymore because it was about to start being restored. This is not a story about a mother who turned on her daughter. This is a story about a mother who finally understood that protecting her own survival was not a betrayal of motherhood. It was a requirement of it. The phone on the table was still glowing. 13 missed calls. 13 voicemails waiting. Probably all the same message. Variations on a single theme. Vivienne, this is unfair. Vivienne, you are overreacting. Vivienne, You need to take that listing down! Vivienne, this is going to ruin me! She was right about the last part. It was going to ruin her. But ruin is what happens when you make an agreement you have no intention of keeping. Ruin is what happens when you believe your mother's love is a fixed asset you can draw against indefinitely without ever being called to account. Ruin is what happens when you mistake patience for a permission that was never granted. I closed the laptop. I picked up the coffee cup that had gone cold while I was handling the bookings. And I stood up from the kitchen table where I had spent the last 3 hours converting the room my daughter had designed into the recovery of the financial life she had spent 9 months destroying. The house was quiet. The kind of quiet you only feel when something has shifted and you are the only one in the room who knows it yet. The license came in a manila envelope on a Tuesday in February, and when Destiny showed me the framed certificate with her name printed in calligraphy, I made her a pot of my mother's red rice and okra to celebrate. That was how I marked moments, with food, with ritual, with the particular care you show someone when you believe they are standing at the beginning of something real. She had studied for 18 months, passed the esthetician exam on the first attempt, and now she had the credential that meant she could work legally in a salon, take private clients, build something that was actually hers. I was proud of her. I meant that without reservation. What I did not know yet was that the credential was the beginning of a different kind of business altogether. The first sponsored post arrived 4 weeks later. It was for a skincare brand I had never heard of, and Destiny had negotiated the rate herself. $800 for a photograph of her using their product, a testimonial video, and access to her followers, which numbered about 40,000 at that point. I remember her calling me at work to tell me, breathless, and I remember saying, "That is $800 for one post." And her saying, "Mama, that is how it works now. That is the whole economy." I did not fully understand what that meant. I still do not. But $800 for a single photograph felt, in 2023, like proof that she had found her way into something that was going to work. The esthetician work dried up within 2 months. She did not say that directly. She said the salon environment was too limiting, that the clients wanted the same 5 services over and over, that the real money was in building a personal brand. She said she was going to focus on her content creation and take private clients from home. I said that sounded reasonable. I said she was smart to think long term. I said a lot of things that sounded like support and felt, in hindsight, like permission. By the time the furniture started arriving, she was signing contracts with 3 different brands for monthly sponsored posts. The money was not steady. Some months she made $3,000. Some months she made nothing. But in the month she made something, she spent it immediately. Tum. The first piece was a mirror with a brass frame. Something she said would elevate the aesthetic of her bedroom. Then came a desk that cost more than my first car. Then the velvet headboard, which was $3,200. And I remember the text message where I asked her if she was sure, if she had checked the price, if that was really what she wanted. And she answered with a single sentence. "Mama, aesthetics are the business." She was not wrong. Aesthetics were the business. But I was still paying the mortgage on the house those aesthetics were being displayed inside. This is what I want you to understand about the 18 months before we signed the rental agreement. I was not blind to what was happening. I was watching it. I was just choosing to call it something else. I was calling it investment. I was calling it her building her brand. I was calling it the cost of having a daughter who was ambitious and creative and determined to make something of herself. I was calling it generosity, and I was calling it motherhood, and I was calling it support. What I was not calling it was what it actually was, the beginning of her taking for granted that whatever she wanted would be absorbed by whatever I had, that my resources existed to backstop her risk, that her big ideas would always be roofed and powered and mortgaged by my paycheck. The box spring arrived on a Sunday in late August. It came with the mattress and the frame as part of a bedroom set she had ordered. And they were all stacked on the porch when I came home from my shift at St. Catherine's. I had worked the cardiac unit that morning, which meant I had been on my feet since 5:45, and my legs were sending me messages about it. But the furniture was there, and Destiny was already home, and there was no question about what needed to happen next. We were going to carry it upstairs. The box spring was heavy in a particular way, the kind of heavy that is awkward rather than overwhelming, and I remember taking one end while Destiny positioned herself at the other. We started up the stairs. My hands were sweating. The staircase was narrow. "Halfway up," I said. "We should have waited for someone to help." And she said, "I've got it, Mama." In that tone she had developed, the one that suggested she was tolerating my limitations rather than accepting help from me. What I did not know, as we were carrying it, was that I was already in the photograph that would later be posted to her Instagram. Except I was not in the actual photograph. What I mean is, 6 feet away, standing in the doorway of the upstairs bedroom. Destiny had set up a ring light and propped her phone on a shelf. And she was recording the moment I finished carrying the box. Spring up the stairs, but not the moment that included me. She was filming the room itself, the light coming through the window, her hand touching the new mattress. And she had positioned the camera so that if you watched the final reel, all you would see was the transformation of an empty bedroom into a designer sanctuary. What you would not hear was my breathing, which was laboured enough that she had asked me once if I needed to sit down. What you would not see was the moment I steadied myself against the wall at the top of the landing. What you would not feel was the precise weight of the moment, my body doing the work, and her phone doing the recording, and the distance between those two facts growing wider with every post she made about building your dream space and manifesting luxury on a budget, and the importance of investing in yourself. The bedroom was beautiful when we finished. I am not going to pretend it was not. The headboard was velvet and the colour of deep wine, and the light from the window made it look like something from a magazine. The gallery wall she had spent the previous month curating was hung with care. Prints of her own designs mixed with photographs of other influencers she admired. And the whole thing created the effect of a life that was both aspirational and somehow already achieved. It was the kind of room that made you want to take a photograph in it. In fact, that was the entire point. I stood in the doorway after we finished, and Destiny said, "What do you think, Mama?" And I said, "It is beautiful, baby. It is too nice for a rental. Though, you sure you want to live like this?" And she said, "Mama, it is still my room." And we both let that sentence hang there like something neither of us was quite ready to examine. It is still my room. As if the question I had asked was whether it was still hers, when what I had actually meant was whether she understood the difference between a room you owned and a room you occupied, between building something for yourself and consuming something your mother was paying for. The Sunday dinner came 2 weeks after the box spring. I made smothered pork chops and cornbread and collard greens. The things I'd made every Sunday since Destiny was small enough to sit under the kitchen table while I cooked. She was home less frequently by then. She was always somewhere for content, always travelling to shoot with other creators, always accumulating the raw material for the life she was performing online. But she came home for Sunday dinner because that was the one ritual I had held firm on, and she knew I would not bend it even if she did. We were sitting at the table, and I said, "I need to talk to you about something." I remember my voice sounding careful, the way you sound when you're about to ask for something you think you should not have to ask for, but you have run out of other options. The mortgage is $1,747 a month. You have been home for 2 years now, and you are using the house like a staging ground for your work. I am not asking you to leave, but I am asking you to contribute. $1,100 a month. It is not full rent, but it is something, and it would help me breathe. She did not say no. She said, like, officially? And I said, yes, officially. A rental agreement, just to make it clear to both of us what the arrangement is. And she said, that seems weird. Mama, like, we are family. And I said, exactly. That is why we need it in writing. I was trying to protect her. I thought I was trying to give her the structure and the accountability that would teach her about the real world. What I was actually doing was giving her the legal framework she would later ignore. The agreement she would later disregard. The thing my best friend Rochelle would insist we notarize, because Rochelle had seen what I could not yet see. That my daughter was not going to pay. That she was already deciding she would not. And that my generosity was not going to be remembered as sacrifice, but as a debt she did not intend to honor. But that Sunday in September, I did not know any of that. What I knew was that I had asked my daughter to contribute to the roof she was sleeping under, and she had not yet said no, which meant I could still believe it was going to work. The negotiation took 3 weeks. I had expected it to take 3 days, but I had also expected Destiny to say yes without question. Which told me something about how little I understood my own daughter's relationship to the word no. The first time I brought it up formally, after the Sunday dinner had cleared and we were both still at the table, she said, "Can we talk about it later?" And I said, "Yes." And we did not talk about it later. The second time, she said, "I need to think about the number." And I said, "Okay, think about it." And 2 days passed with no follow-up. The third time, I said, "I need an answer." And she said, 1,100 seems like a lot. And I said, "It is not a lot. The entire mortgage is 1,747. 1,100 is what you owe to live here." She pushed back on the math. She said, "But I'm not using the whole house. I'm just using my room." I said, "You are using the electricity, the water, the internet, the property taxes, the insurance. 1,100 is fair." She said, "What if I cannot make it every month?" I said, Then we write it down so we both know what the agreement is. And you know that if you cannot make it, we have a conversation about it before you simply do not pay. That is how my mother would have handled it. With clarity, with structure, with the understanding that a boundary stated clearly is a kindness because it prevents the damage that comes from a boundary that shifts depending on mood or leverage. My mother had been gone for 6 years by then, but I could still hear her voice saying, "Baby, tell them what you need and stick to it. The ones who love you will rise to it." So I stuck to it. 1,100. Not negotiable on the number, but negotiable on the timing. I said she could start in November, giving her the month of October to get her finances in order. I said we could make a plan together. I said I was not trying to punish her. I was trying to protect us both. She agreed on a Tuesday morning in late September. She did not call to tell me or text me anything formal. She called from her esthetician chair where she was doing somebody's eyelash extensions and said, "Okay, Mama, I will do it." And I said, "Thank you, baby, thank you." And I meant it. I thought we had crossed a threshold. I thought we had made something clear. What I did not know was that she had already decided, in that moment or sometime before it, that she would not actually keep that promise. But I did not know that then. So I made the appointment with the notary for the following Saturday. This was when Rochelle got involved. Rochelle Barnes, my best friend, worked as the office manager at Calvary Baptist Church, which meant she had administrative access to everything, including the template for a basic rental agreement that the church used when they rented out the fellowship hall. She came to my house on Friday evening with the template printed out, a pen in her hand, and an expression that said she had something to tell me, but was still deciding whether I was ready to hear it. We sat at my kitchen table, the same table where the Sunday dinners happened, where I had made cornbread and collard greens my whole adult life, where my mother had sat with her own coffee and told me things I did not want to know but needed to hear. Rochelle spread the agreement out in front of me and went line by line. The tenant name, the property address, the monthly rent amount of $1,100, the due date of the first of each month, the 30-day notice clause, if either party wanted to end the arrangement. "You are going to notarize this," Rochelle said. It was not a question. "Do I need to?" I asked. "Yes," she said. "Just in case, baby. I am not playing with you right now." I remember laughing. I remember thinking she was being paranoid, being overly cautious, letting some worst-case scenario spiral that was not going to happen. I remember saying, "Rochelle, it is my daughter," and her looking at me over the top of her reading glasses and saying, "Exactly. It is your daughter. That is why you notarize." The next morning, I drove to the notary's office with the agreement and paid the fee and got it stamped and signed by someone I had never met before. Someone official, someone whose job was to make documents matter in ways that could not be talked away or laughed off later. I brought the notarized copy home and left it in the kitchen drawer. And I still thought Rochelle was being dramatic. Destiny signed on a Saturday afternoon. Sitting at that same kitchen table, she did not read the entire agreement. She read the first page and the signature page and signed her name in the way she signed things. Carelessly, with a flourish, like her signature was a brand rather than a commitment. The notary had already done the work, so I did not need to go back, but Destiny asked if she wanted to see it again, and I said no. It was done, it was official, and we could both move forward knowing exactly what we had agreed to. She smiled when she handed the pen back to me. So she said, "I feel very adult right now." And I said, "You are? This is what adults do." What neither of us said was that we had just signed a document that would become, 9 months later, the legal framework for my decision to list her room for $185 a night on Airbnb. What neither of us said was that her name at the bottom of that page meant that she had given me the right to serve her with 30 days' notice, which I would do on August 31st, in certified mail, with copies of 47 screenshots of her Instagram posts from Miami, attached as evidence that her non-payment was willful rather than hardship. But that was not this moment. This moment was still soft. This moment still belonged to the before. The furniture arrived the following week. Not all of it. The smaller pieces had come over the previous months. But the major pieces. The things that transformed the room from a space she slept in into a set piece designed for documentation. The movers came on a Wednesday, and Destiny directed them with the precision of someone who understood that the angle of a headboard, the distance between furniture and wall, the way light caught a frame. These were not decorative details, but the actual substance of her work. By Saturday, the room was finished enough for the photograph she wanted to take. I was home, having just finished a 12-hour shift at St. Catherine's, and I had taken a shower and put on clean clothes and was moving through the house with the particular tiredness that comes from having held someone's hand while they died, having adjusted machines, having written notes, charts, having carried the weight of other people's suffering in the specific way that nurses do. I was thinking about coffee and a book and the couch. Destiny found me in the kitchen and said, "Can you help me carry the headboard upstairs? I want to get the room photographed before the light changes." The velvet headboard was $3,200. It was the colour of deep wine, but the kind of red that looked almost black in certain light and then caught fire in others. It was wrapped in plastic that crinkled as we picked it up. And it was heavier than I expected. Not impossibly heavy, but the kind of weight that required both of us to manage it without dropping it or letting it scrape against the walls. We started up the staircase. I had the bottom end. My Destiny had the top. The staircase was narrow. It had been built in 1964, when the house was first constructed, and nobody had thought to make it wide enough for 2 people carrying something tall and unwieldy. We had to angle it slightly. And at one point, about halfway up, I said, "This is not going to fit." And Destiny said, "Yes, it will. Mama, just twist it a little to the left." And we twisted it. And it fit. The way things fit when you are determined enough to make them fit. We set it down in the bedroom, and I stepped back to look at it. In the morning light from the window, it was stunning. It was the kind of beautiful that made the room feel like something from a magazine spread. Something that did not belong in a house where someone actually lived, but rather in a photograph of a house where someone lived. "What do you think, Mama?" Destiny asked. "Is it too much?" I said, "It is too nice for a rental. Baby, you sure you want to live like this?" She said, "Mama, it is still my home." We both let that sentence hang in the hallway air. We both knew what it meant and what it did not mean. I knew that she was telling me it was still hers, that my concern about the value of the furniture was missing the point. That what mattered to her was that this space belonged to her and she could design it however she wanted. What I did not say was that being the owner of a room and being the person who paid for the roof over that room were two different things. What I did not say was that I was already afraid of what she was building here. Not the headboard itself, but the expectation it represented, the belief that beautiful things should simply appear, that someone else's labor and someone else's money should be the foundation for her aesthetic choices. What I did not say was what Rochelle had tried to tell me when she insisted on the notary, that I was watching my daughter learn that she could have everything without paying for any of it, that I was the one teaching her, and that eventually she would stop even asking. Instead, I said, "It is beautiful." And I meant it. And I left her there to take the photographs, which she did, with the ring light casting that perfect halo, with the velvet headboard as the hero of the frame, with my presence, my effort carrying it up the stairs, my labor, my resources, edited entirely out of the final cut. The agreement stayed in the kitchen drawer. The notary seal was official and irrevocable. The headboard was installed, and we were both still pretending that knowing what was coming was the same thing as being able to stop it. February arrived with a text message. Not a phone call, not a conversation, just a message that came through on my lunch break. "Hey mama, I am short this month. One of my big clients just had their card declined, and I am waiting to reschedule. Can I do half now and half next week?" I was at St. Catherine's Medical Centre, where I had worked as a licensed practical nurse for 19 years. And I had 30 minutes to eat something and get back to the cardiac unit. My scrubs were still damp from the morning. I had been helping with a patient who was more confused than usual, and there had been an accident with a urinal that had soaked through everything. I had changed my top, but not had time to fully dry off. So I was sitting in the break room with a container of leftover rice and beans, reading a message that was asking me to absorb the shortfall of her first rent payment. I said yes. I texted back, "Okay, baby, what day next week?" And she wrote back immediately, "Definitely by Wednesday." And I said, "Okay, Wednesday." And that was it. That was the entire negotiation. I did not ask to see a screenshot of the declined card. I did not ask which client or when the rescheduled payment was expected. I did not ask whether the big deal she was always talking about had actually materialized, or whether she was still waiting on it to come through. I accepted the story because it was plausible, and because I did not want to be the kind of mother who interrogated her adult daughter about money. I wanted to be the kind of mother who was understanding. That was my first mistake. Wednesday came and went. By Friday, I texted her and said, "How is the client payment coming?" And she wrote back, "Still processing. Can I give you the full amount next month instead? I am going to restructure my brand deal portfolio, and I should have a lot more coming in." I said, "Okay," because I did not know what a brand deal portfolio was exactly, or how it worked, or whether restructuring it meant she would have more money, or less money, or no money at all. I said, "Okay," because she was my daughter, and because I was thinking about the mortgage and trying not to panic, and because saying no felt like saying, "I do not believe in you," which was something I had promised myself I would never do. This is what I have learned about myself. Narrating this story in hindsight, I was willing to absorb unlimited amount of chaos in the name of not appearing to doubt my own child. I was willing to watch the math stop working and convince myself that I was not actually watching the math stop working. I was willing to take on her financial responsibilities and call it love. And when I did all of that, when I accepted her stories without verification, when I rearranged my own expectations to accommodate her failure to follow through, when I went home and made my mortgage payment with money she was supposed to contribute, I was not being generous. I was being silently erased. But I did not understand that. What I understood in late February was that my daughter had asked for grace, and I had given it, and that made me feel like I was doing motherhood correctly. The restructuring conversation happened over the phone on a Tuesday. She called me at work, and I took the call in the supply closet because that was the only place I could talk without anyone hearing. She said, "Mama, I have been thinking about my business model, and I am going to pivot. All these one-off sponsored posts are not sustainable. I need to focus on building long-term brand partnerships, and that is going to mean I might have some slower months while I am transitioning. But once I land the right deals, I am going to make way more than I am making now." I said, "How long is the transition going to take?" She said, "A couple months, maybe 3. But Mama, once this lands, I am going to be able to pay you back everything. This is going to be huge." And I believed her, not because I had any evidence that it would be huge, but because she said it with such certainty, and because believing her meant I did not have to accept that my daughter had moved into my house and was now going to cost me money instead of contributing to the household. Believing her meant that this was temporary. Believing her meant that I was not being taken advantage of. I was being asked to be patient while she built something real. I said, "Okay, baby, I am proud of you for thinking ahead like that." She said, "Thank you, Mama. I knew you would understand." And I went back to work and pushed a patient's blood pressure medication and checked an IV line, and did not think about how my own mortgage was now being paid entirely by my paycheck, which came to $52,400 a year, which meant that after taxes and health insurance and the mortgage payment of $1,847 a month, I had approximately $700 left for everything else. This is what happened in the days after that conversation. Destiny did not restructure anything, or rather, she restructured her spending rather than her business model. What she did was continue to take sponsored posts when they came through, but at a lower rate than before, because she was being pickier about which brands aligned with her aesthetic. What she also did was spend more money than she was making on things that looked like investing in herself. Camera equipment, lighting rigs, a trip to a conference for content creators that cost $800 for the ticket alone. But I did not see any of that yet because I was not really looking. I was looking away. I was accepting the narrative she had offered me, that she was restructuring, that this was temporary, that she was building something that would eventually be huge. And I was using that narrative to justify why I should not be angry that she was not paying me. The moment came on a Wednesday in mid-February. I was on my lunch break at St. Catherine's, 30 minutes to eat, and the break room was crowded. So I had taken my container of rice and beans and my phone and gone to sit in my car in the parking lot. The weather was grey, and the sun was not helping, and I sat there with the heat running and scrolled through Instagram while I ate. I did not follow Destiny on Instagram. She had asked me once if I wanted to, and I had said no, that I wanted her to have her own space, that I did not need to be in her business. But I did look at her profile sometimes. I did check in to see what she was posting, what she was saying, who she was collaborating with, and on that Wednesday, what I found was a photograph from 4 days before, 4 days after our restructuring conversation, posted from a Miami rooftop at sunset. The photograph showed Destiny in the center, holding a frosted flute of pink champagne, wearing a resort set that matched the sets worn by 2 other women flanking her. In the background, you could see the bay, the way the light hit the water, the proof that she was somewhere expensive. The location tag read Brickell Key. The caption read, "Manifesting abundance with my tribe. This is what elevation looks like." I sat there in my car, in the parking lot at St. Catherine's Medical Center, with my container of rice and beans going cold in my lap. And I understood something that I would not admit to anyone else for 6 months. My daughter had lied to me. Not in the sense of saying something false, but in the sense of constructing a narrative about financial hardship while simultaneously spending money on a vacation to Miami. She had told me her client's card had declined and her brand portfolio needed restructuring. And 4 days later, she was on a rooftop in South Florida, in a matched resort set with 2 other influencers. And that was not the behavior of someone in financial distress. That was the behavior of someone who knew their mother would absorb the consequences. I did not share the photograph with anyone. I did not send it to Rochelle or mention it to anyone at work. I did not confront Destiny or ask her about it. What I did was screenshot it. What I did was open the notes app on my phone and write down the date, the location, the caption, and a simple observation. Miami, 4 days after restructuring conversation. And what I did, every time I found something that did not match the story I had been told, was add it to that same note, building a document of evidence that I was not yet ready to use. I finished my lunch. I went back inside. I washed my hands and put on a fresh pair of gloves and went back to the cardiac unit, where there was a patient in room 4 who needed her vitals checked, and a patient in room 6 who was asking for pain medication, and a patient in room 2 who had asked me, in the quiet voice of someone who knew something was wrong with their heart, whether I thought they were going to be okay. I told her what I always told them, that the doctors were doing everything they could, that we were monitoring her closely, that it was my job to make sure she was comfortable. I did not tell her that I was sitting in a car in a parking lot, scrolling through photographs of my daughter's vacation while trying to understand how to pay my mortgage. I did not tell her that I was learning, slowly, that my silence was not grace. It was erosion. It was the particular slow damage that happens when you agree to absorb someone else's consequences in the name of love. What I did was show up. What I did was work my shift. What I did was accept that the full $1,100 would not come on Wednesday, and probably not next month either, and that I was going to have to find a way to make up the difference. That was my second mistake. My first was believing the story. My second was staying quiet about knowing it was a lie. For 6 weeks, I did not tell anyone what I had found. I did not mention the Miami photograph to Rochelle. Did not say anything to Marcus. Did not confront Destiny. What I did was watch. What I did was document. What I did was build a case against the narrative I had been given. The screenshots started with Miami, but they did not stop there. Every time Destiny posted something that contradicted the story of financial hardship and portfolio restructuring, I took a screenshot. When she posted a photo of a new ring light setup she had purchased. $2,000. She captioned it, "Investing in the quality of my content." I screenshotted it. When she posted from a dinner at a restaurant that I knew charged $60 a plate, sitting across from two other influencers in what looked like a coordinated content creation session. I screenshotted it. When she announced a brand partnership with a skincare line that paid her a flat fee plus commission, I screenshotted the announcement. When that same brand sent her a shipment of products worth hundreds of dollars to feature in her feed, I screenshotted the unboxing video. By mid-April, I had 23 screenshots. By early May, I had 37. By the time I walked into Rochelle's office at Calvary Baptist Church on a Thursday afternoon in late May, I had 47. The missed payments had climbed to 4 months. That was $4,400. That was 4 times the mortgage payment sitting on my shoulders, while my daughter posted from rooftops and unboxed luxury skincare and announced brand deals that were supposed to be happening, but somehow never resulted in the money showing up in her account or being transferred to mine. I had stopped asking about it. She had stopped making excuses. We had arrived at a place where the absence of payment was simply accepted as fact. The way you accept weather, it happens. It is unpleasant. You move forward. Rochelle's office was small, cluttered with the administrative work of running a church. Donor files, event planning documents, volunteer sign-up sheets, and 3 coffee cups in various stages of being empty. The walls were covered with photographs from church events, holiday parties, Bible study groups, the youth choir in their robes. Rochelle had worked there for 16 years. She knew every person who walked through the doors. She had seen grief and recovery and people making hard choices about their families. She was the kind of woman who noticed things. I closed the door behind me and fanned the 47 screenshots across her desk, like I was playing a hand of cards. I did not say anything. I just looked at her and waited for her to look at them. She picked up the first one, the Miami rooftop photograph, and then she picked up the second one, which was from 2 days later. Another resort, another frosted glass of something expensive. Then she started reading through them methodically, moving through the stack like someone working through a file. She did not speak. She did not make expressions. She just read. Her lips were pressed together in a thin line. Her reading glasses slipped down her nose once, and she pushed them back up without looking away from the images. When she got to the bottom of the stack, she set them all down carefully and looked up at me. "Baby, this ain't hardship," she said quietly. "This is a performance." That single sentence did something to the story I had been telling myself. It gave me permission to stop believing the narrative. It gave me language for what I had been seeing. It was not that my daughter had hit a rough patch and needed time to recover. It was not that the restructuring was real and just slower than expected. It was that she had decided, at some point, maybe when she first did not pay, maybe before that the agreement she had signed was something she could simply choose not to honor. that my resources were available to her without reciprocation, that I would absorb the cost of her lifestyle because I was her mother, and mothers did that. I said, "So what do I do?" Rochelle did not answer me right away. She turned to her computer and pulled up her email. She scrolled through her inbox for a moment. Then she pulled out a piece of paper from her printer and wrote down a name and a phone number. Angela Merritt. Below it, she wrote LLC. Below that, she wrote the word attorney. She said, "Call her. Tell her what is happening. Tell her about the agreement. Tell her about the screenshots. She will tell you what comes next." I said, "I do not want to sue my daughter." Rochelle said, "You are not suing your daughter. You are protecting yourself. There is a difference." She slid the envelope across the desk toward me. The name was written in her handwriting, precise and efficient. Angela Merritt, landlord, tenant, and real estate attorney. The phone number below it was from a local law firm. I picked up the envelope and held it like it was something fragile. Rochelle said, "I've known Angela for 15 years. She does not play games. She will tell you exactly what your options are, and she will not charge you for the first conversation. You call her, and you take those screenshots, and you tell her the entire story. You let her read what I just read, and you let her tell you whether you have a case." "Do I have a case?" I asked. "Baby," Rochelle said, "you have 47 screenshots. You have a notarized agreement. You have 4 months of missed payments. You have a daughter posting from vacations while telling you she is restructuring. That is not a case. That is a documented pattern." I folded the envelope in half and put it in my pocket. I did not use it that day. I did not use it the next day either. I carried it in my pocket for a week, feeling the shape of it, the weight of it, the specific reality of it. Having someone else's phone number in your pocket is different from calling that number. Having the option to take legal action is different from deciding to take it. I was still hoping, I think, that something would change, that destiny would somehow recognize what she had done and reverse course, that we would not have to go down the path that Rochelle's envelope represented. But during that week, 2 more things happened. The first was that Destiny posted another photograph from another sponsored trip, this time to the Bahamas. 5 days at a resort. A brand partnership with a luggage company that had paid for the entire thing. The second was that I did the math again, the way I'd been doing the math since February. 4 months of $1,100 was $4,400. My mortgage was $1,847. If I continued to cover her share, my emergency fund, the one I had spent 11 years building, would be gone by August. I would have no buffer. I would have no protection if I got injured at work. If there was a medical emergency, if anything happened that required money, I did not have immediate access to. On the Thursday of that second week, I called Angela Merritt's office and made an appointment. The receptionist asked what the consultation was regarding, and I said, "Tenant disputes." And she put me down for the following Monday at 2 p.m. I printed out all 47 screenshots. I gathered the notarized rental agreement from the kitchen drawer where I had left it after Destiny signed it. I gathered every text message I had saved where she had promised to pay and did not. I put it all in a folder and I carried it to Angela's office on Monday afternoon. This is the moment where the story stopped being about my relationship with my daughter and started being about the law. This is the moment where I moved from hoping she would do the right thing to ensuring that I could protect myself if she did not. Rochelle understood that the moment I walked into her office with those 47 screenshots. She knew that what I needed was not sympathy or advice about how to talk to Destiny. What I needed was someone to tell me that I was not crazy for seeing what I was seeing, and that there were legal tools available to me if I decided to use them. The envelope with Angela Merritt's number stayed in my pocket for a week. But once I called, once I made the appointment, once I sat down across from an attorney and fanned those screenshots across her desk, the same way I had fanned them across Rochelle's, everything changed. Angela read through them with the same methodical attention that Rochelle had shown. She asked questions. She took notes. She pulled up the notarized agreement on her screen and zoomed in on the 30-day notice clause and the amount of rent. And then she said, "Vivienne, you have every legal right to serve her with notice. You have documentation. You have a signed agreement. You have a clear pattern of non-payment. If she does not pay or does not move out within 30 days, you can file for eviction." I said, "I do not want to evict my daughter." She said, "I understand, but the question is not whether you want to. The question is whether you can afford not to. Let me ask you something. If she does not pay next month, what happens?" I did not answer because I already knew the answer. The emergency fund would be gone. I would be living paycheck to paycheck. I would be one small emergency away from financial crisis. All because I was absorbing the cost of my adult daughter's lifestyle. Angela said, "We can start with a formal demand letter. We document the 4 months of missed rent. We request full payment by a specific date. We attach copies of the agreement and documentation of the non-payment. If she pays, the problem is solved. If she does not, we move to the next step. But you need to understand, this is not going to be pleasant. This is going to hurt. But it is going to hurt less than losing your house because you gave away the money that was supposed to keep you safe." I left her office with a plan. Angela would draft the demand letter. We would attach the 47 screenshots as evidence. We would request payment by August 31st. And if Destiny did not pay, we would move forward with the 30-day notice that was already written into the agreement she had signed. It took me 3 weeks to understand what I was actually preparing to do. It took me 3 weeks of carrying that knowledge before I was ready to act on it. But Rochelle had been right about one thing. This was not about suing my daughter. This was about protecting myself, and for the first time in 6 months, I was going to do it. The Saturday came without warning. I was home, doing laundry, folding things that did not belong to me because I was still the person who managed the household, even though the household had become a place where I was not sure who owed what to whom. The doorbell rang at 2:15 in the afternoon, and when I opened it, Destiny was standing there with her hands on her hips, and her jaw set in the particular way it set when she had decided something and was not interested in discussion. Behind her, at the curb, Marcus's car was idling, the engine running. He did not get out. He just sat there, the car running, the visual equivalent of support, without participation. Marcus and I had divorced 6 years earlier, and he had spent the time since then perfecting the art of being present without being involved. He would show up for major events, but he would not weigh in on decisions. He would offer opinions about parenting, but he would not actually parent. He would support Destiny's narrative without questioning it. This Saturday, he was there to back her up, but not to actually back her up. Destiny came inside without being invited. She walked past me into the kitchen and pulled out a chair and sat down at the table as if she owned the moment, which I suppose she thought she did. I closed the front door and followed her. I did not sit down. I stood at the counter and waited. "I know what you are doing," she said. "I know you are trying to evict me, and I'm telling you right now that it is not going to work. I am a legal tenant here. I have mail coming to this address. I have established residency. And if you try to list this room on Airbnb or remove my belongings or do anything to prevent me from accessing my space, I am calling the police and reporting you for an illegal lockout. You cannot just kick me out. Mama, there are laws." She was right about the laws. There are laws. In many places, if you have lived somewhere long enough, you become a legal tenant and you cannot be removed without proper eviction proceedings. But what Destiny did not know, what she had never bothered to learn because she had never read the document she signed, was that there were also laws about what a notarized rental agreement could do. And that agreement was sitting in the kitchen drawer directly to my right. I did not respond to what she said. I did not argue with her about the legal framework or explain the specific statutes that made her wrong. Instead, I opened the drawer next to the stove where I kept the important documents, and I pulled out the folder that contained the notarized rental agreement, the agreement that Rochelle had insisted we get notarized, the agreement that I had driven to the notary's office to have stamped and signed, the agreement that Destiny had signed without reading on a Saturday afternoon 6 months earlier, when she had felt very adult about the process. I did not open it at the signature page. I opened it to page 2. I opened it to the specific clause that Angela Merritt had pointed out to me in her office. The clause about notice. The clause that said that either party could terminate the tenancy with 30 days written notice. I opened it flat on the table, turned it so that Destiny could read it, and I set it down between us without saying a single word. The silence that followed lasted 4 minutes. I know, because I was watching the microwave clock. The digital numbers glowing green on the wall above the stove. And I was counting them. 4 minutes. That is longer than it sounds when you are sitting across from someone at a kitchen table, and there is nothing but the sound of a page being read and the idling engine of a car outside where her father was sitting, waiting, not actually involved in any of it. Destiny read the first paragraph. Then she read it again. Then her eyes moved to the fine print below it. Then she looked back at the top and read the whole thing again, more slowly, as if the words might change if she looked at them long enough. I watched her face move through a series of expressions. Confusion, then focus, then a kind of dawning understanding. The moment when she realized that the piece of paper in front of her, the one she had signed without reading, the one she had laughed about afterward, the one that she had never imagined she would actually need to look at, that this piece of paper made her threats meaningless. She said, "I did not read this." I did not answer. The notarized seal was right there on the page. The date was right there. Her signature was right there. All of it was right there, in a format that meant something in a court of law. She said, "This says 30 days. Still, I did not answer. There was nothing to answer. The clause was clear. 30 days. Either party. Written notice. No exceptions for daughters who had decided they did not feel like paying rent. The 4 minutes stretched into 5. She read it one more time. Slower this time, as if she was trying to find a loophole in the language. As if somewhere in those sentences there might be an escape clause that said, unless the tenant is your daughter, or unless the tenant is building an aesthetic brand, or unless the tenant is struggling with restructuring. There was no such clause. There had never been a such clause. I had just spent the last months believing that the clause did not matter, that love and motherhood superseded documentation. Now I was learning something different. After the silence had lasted long enough that it had become a presence in the room, rather than just an absence of speech, Destiny pushed the paper back across the table toward me. She did not look up. She just pushed it, and it slid across the surface, and I let it go. "When are you doing this?" she asked quietly. "Soon," I said. It was the only answer I had. The demand letter was drafted. Angela had it ready. August 31st was marked on the calendar. The 30-day notice was waiting. 30 days from when the notice is served. That is what the agreement says. Destiny stood up. She looked toward the window where her father's car was still running. Then she looked back at me. She said, "He came with me because I thought you would be more reasonable if he was here." I said, "And he sat in the car. Did he?" She did not have an answer to that. She picked up the chair she had been sitting in and pushed it back under the table, even though it did not need pushing back. She was doing something with her hands, because her hands needed something to do. Then she turned and walked toward the living room, toward the stairs that led up to the bedroom that was still hers, in the way that rooms are yours, the way they contain your things, the way they hold your history, but not in the way that matters when the person paying the mortgage has decided that it is time for you to pay the price of occupying space. I heard her go upstairs. I heard her moving around in her room. I heard the sounds of her putting things into a bag. The bag, I would later learn, that contained the essentials she would need for the next 30 days, because she understood, finally, that those 30 days were all that remained. Marcus's car stopped idling after she came back down. I heard the sound change from the low rumble of an engine at idle to the sharper sound of acceleration. I did not look out the window to watch them leave. I just stood in the kitchen and picked up the notarized rental agreement. The piece of paper that Rochelle had insisted on. The piece of paper that I had laughed at her for being paranoid about. The piece of paper that had just become the most powerful document in my house. I folded it carefully and put it back in the drawer. And then I called Angela Merritt's office and told them to send the formal demand letter. Certified mail, dated August 31st. With the 30-day notice clause highlighted in yellow, with the 47 screenshots attached as evidence. With every dollar amount precise to the cent, the certified mail envelope arrived on August 31st. Angela Merritt had prepared it the way a lawyer prepares something that is meant to be irrefutable. 2 copies of the formal demand letter, both printed on her letterhead. Both dated the same day, both accompanied by the same supplementary packet. 47 screenshots. Exhibit II. each one time-stamped, each one showing Destiny's lifestyle, contradicting the narrative of hardship she had offered me. Miami rooftops, designer resort sets, branded partnerships, meal kit sponsorships, a calendar of consumption that added up to a very specific claim. My daughter had decided not to pay because she could afford not to pay, not because she was unable to pay. The demand was for $9,900. That was 4 months of rent at $1,100 per month. That was the amount that had been missing from my life. The amount that had drawn down my emergency fund. The amount that had turned a notarized agreement into a piece of paper that now meant everything. I took one copy to the post office myself. I stood in line with it in my hands. Certified mail, return receipt requested, the kind of mail that left a paper trail. And I paid for the postage and watched the clerk scan it. That was the moment I crossed something, not a line. Exactly, because the line had been crossed weeks ago when I took the first screenshot. But a particular kind of threshold. This was no longer a mother trying to figure out how to handle her daughter's irresponsibility. This was a woman serving legal notice on someone who owed her money. Angela hand-delivered the second copy herself. She called me the following morning and said, "It's done!" And I understood that she meant the letter had been delivered, received, and documented. There would be a record of it. There would be no confusion about what had happened or when. 30 days from August 31st meant September 30th. That was the date by which Destiny had to either pay the full $9,900 or vacate the premises. Those were the only two options the agreement allowed for. The photographer came the following week. I had found her through a referral from one of Rochelle's cousins, a woman who did real estate photography and understood how to make a space look like something someone would pay money to occupy. Her name was Patricia, and she arrived on a Tuesday morning with lights and a tripod and a camera that cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. She was professional in a way that made me think she had photographed a lot of spaces, a lot of lives that people wanted to sell. "That's a beautiful headboard," she said when she saw the velvet headboard in the bedroom, the one that Destiny and I had carried up the stairs together. The one that had cost $3,200. I said, "Yes, it is," she said. "The light in here in the morning is perfect. That's going to be your hero shot." I did not know what a hero shot was exactly, but I understood that it meant the photograph that made people want to book the room. The photograph that said, "This is worth your money. This is worth your time. This is worth traveling to experience." Patricia spent an hour arranging the light, positioning the camera, testing angles. She took photographs from the doorway, from the corner, from directly facing the headboard. She photographed the gallery wall that Destiny had spent weeks curating. She photographed the eucalyptus reed diffuser, which I had deliberately left plugged in because the Airbnb photographs were going to be better with it glowing amber in the corner than they would be without it. 37 total, Patricia said when she finished, scrolling through the images on her camera. "Any of these you want me to adjust?" I looked through them. The room looked beautiful. It looked curated. It looked like something from a magazine, which was exactly what Destiny had designed it to be. It looked like a space that someone had poured money and attention into, which was true. Except the someone was me. And the attention belonged to a young woman who was spending those resources on maintaining an image while avoiding the cost of the roof that contained it. "They are perfect," I said. The listing copy was harder. I sat at the kitchen table the night before the photographs were scheduled to be uploaded, and I stared at a blank document, and I tried to write something that sounded like a host, rather than like a woman serving legal notice on her daughter. Rochelle was on speakerphone, having insisted on it, telling me she was not about to miss this moment. I wrote, "Designer furnished suite with curated aesthetic, queen velvet headboard, gallery wall, spa-grade ambient diffuser, morning light, private entry, immaculate condition." Rochelle said, "That sounds like a lawyer describing a crime scene. Make it sound like a person." I tried again. This room is designed for people who care about details. The velvet headboard catches the morning light. The gallery wall tells a story. Every element was chosen with intention. Rochelle said, "Better, but it still sounds angry." I said, "Maybe I am angry." Rochelle said, "You might be, but the listing should not sound like it. The listing should sound like you are offering something beautiful that you believe in." She was right. I rewrote it again. A thoughtfully designed bedroom for guests who appreciate intentional spaces. This room showcases original gallery wall art, designer furnishings, and natural light. Every detail has been selected to create a warm, aesthetically cohesive environment. Rochelle read it back to me and said, "Yes, that sounds like a host. That sounds like someone who cares about the space and the people who are going to stay in it, which you do. Actually, you are protecting the space. You are protecting your house. That is care." The hero photo was the velvet headboard in morning light. Patricia had been right about that. The light came through the window and hit the fabric and made it look like something precious. Something worth travelling for. Something that had been thoughtfully chosen and lovingly maintained. The reed diffuser was glowing amber in the corner, casting its little light into the room. Everything looked intentional. Everything looked beautiful. Everything looked like it had been created with love. I looked at that photograph for a long time before I uploaded it. I thought about the Saturday that Destiny and I had carried the headboard up the stairs together. I thought about the way she had said, "This room is too nice for a rental, baby." And she had laughed and said, "Mama, it's still my room." And we had both understood in that moment that we were standing at some kind of threshold, some place where her space and my space and the money that was supposed to bridge the gap between them had all gotten confused. I thought about that moment, and I thought about the $9,900, and I thought about the fact that the memory of that day, the way we laughed, the way her hand was on the headboard, the way we were both holding something beautiful together, did not change any of the math. I clicked to upload. The photograph went into the Airbnb system. The listing was created. Room 1B, 1 queen bed, designer furnishings, gallery wall, morning light. The price was set at $185 per night. I did the math in my head. 54 nights booked would cover the $9,900. 54 nights of people paying to sleep in a room that my daughter had designed, but not paid for. In a house that I owned, and my daughter had walked away from the moment the agreement became inconvenient. 37 photographs, each one a choice. each one a decision to present this room as something worth paying for, something worth traveling to experience, something worth the money and the time and the attention it took to get here. The listing sat in my drafts folder overnight. I did not publish it immediately. I wanted to sit with the decision for one more night to make sure I was ready for what came next. But I knew, as I sat there in the kitchen with my laptop open and my coffee gone cold, that I had already made the choice. The moment I had called the photographer, the moment I had written the listing copy, the moment I had selected that hero shot, I had decided. The next morning, October 14th, I woke up early and published the listing. I did not hesitate. I did not second guess. I simply clicked the button that moved it from draft to live, and then I sent the link to Destiny in a text message with no caption. Just the URL, blue and clickable, showing her exactly what I had done. At 9:02 in the morning on October 14th, I clicked the button that made the listing live. The Airbnb dashboard refreshed. Room 1B appeared in my host account. Active, available, searchable. It was real now. It was no longer theoretical or prepared or hypothetical. It was actual. 2 minutes later, I texted Destiny the link. It's just the URL. Blue and clickable. With no explanation or caption or anything that might soften what she was about to see. The text message showed her, without words, exactly what I had done. She would know immediately. She would understand before she even opened the link that her room, the room she had designed, the room she had filled with furniture she had chosen, the room she had filmed and photographed and presented to 847,000 followers as proof of her success, was now available for $185 per night to anyone in the world who had a credit card. 9 minutes later, at 9:11 a.m., the first booking request came through. It was from Patricia Holloway. She had 47 5-star reviews. Her message was already written. Designer aesthetic, natural light, perfect for content creators. I'm available immediately and can commit to 7 nights. What's your fastest booking process? She understood exactly what she was looking at. She was not coming for a place to sleep. She was coming for the proof that she could afford to occupy something beautiful. Something designed with intention. Something that other people wanted. She was coming for the story she would tell about it afterward. And she was willing to pay to make that story real. I did not approve her request immediately. I sat with it. I watched the dashboard. I waited to see what would happen next. The phone started ringing at 9:14. I let it ring. I did not answer it. The call went to voicemail. Then it rang again. Voicemail. Again. Voicemail. I sat at the kitchen table with my hands on the keyboard, and I let the phone ring, and I watched the voicemail count climb. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. By 9:20, there were 7 missed calls. By 9:30, there were 9. By 9:45, there were 13 calls from Destiny, coming in at irregular intervals, each one a little more desperate than the last. I picked up the notebook that I had been using since February to document the missed payments. The same notebook where I had written down dates and amounts and the growing total of what Destiny owed. The notebook that had become the record of the slow erosion. That was now also the notebook where I had written Angela Merritt's case number, the date the demand letter was sent, the date the certified mail receipt came back, showing it had been delivered. Now, I added a new section. Today's date, the times of each call, 9:04, 9:08, 9:12, 9:16, 9:19, 9:22, 9:25, 9:28, 9:31, 9:34, 9:37, 9:40, 9:43, 9:46. 13 calls, each one time-stamped, each one a record, each one proof that she understood what had happened the moment she saw that link. The coffee next to my laptop was getting cold. I had poured it at 8:45, before I published the listing, when I was still deciding whether I actually had the courage to do this thing. By 9:40, it was barely warm anymore. I did not drink it. I just let it sit there, cooling, a marker of how much time had passed since I had begun. Patricia Holloway's booking request was still sitting there, waiting for my response. 7 nights. That was $1,295. That was the first major chunk of the $9,900 that Destiny owed. That was proof that there were people in the world willing to pay for what she had built, but not paid for. I looked at the request. I looked at her 47 5-star reviews. I looked at the timestamp showing that she had sent this at 9:11, before Destiny had even finished making her first call. Patricia Holloway did not know anything about what was happening between me and my daughter. She did not know that she was about to become part of a reversal that had been months in the making. She just knew that she saw a room she wanted to stay in. And she wanted to stay there for 7 nights. And she was willing to pay. The cursor hovered over the confirm button. I sat there with my hand on the mouse, and I did not click it immediately. I let the cursor hover for 1 long moment. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. The length of a breath. The time it takes to understand that you are about to do something you cannot take back. The time it takes to close a door you know you are never going to reopen. Because that is what this was. This was not a threat or a negotiation or a conversation that could still be redirected. This was a choice. Once I approved Patricia Holloway's booking, once her money was locked into the system, once the confirmation went out to her with the exact dates and the exact address and the exact details of where she was coming to stay, everything arranged. Destiny would understand that her mother had not just threatened to list the room. Her mother had actually done it. Her mother had found a guest. Her mother had converted her space into income. I clicked confirm. The booking appeared in my calendar. October 21st through October 28th. 7 nights. $1,295 due to arrive in my account within a week of checkout. That was the first payment. That was the proof of concept. That was the beginning of recovery. The phone rang again. 14 now. I did not answer it. I added the timestamp to the notebook. 9:49 a.m. By the time noon arrived, there were more booking requests in the queue. A couple from New York, looking for a weekend stay. A solo traveler with 8 5-star reviews looking for a weeknight. A group of content creators asking about a 10-night block in November. The dashboard was filling up. The listing was working. The room that my daughter had designed to be beautiful was being validated by strangers who had no stake in our conflict. No knowledge of our history. No investment in whether she had paid her rent. They just saw a space they wanted to occupy. And they were willing to pay for it. I sat at that kitchen table for the rest of the morning. I did not go to work. I had called in, told them I would not be there. I had planned for this. I knew that today would require my full attention. I knew that the moment the listing went live, everything would accelerate, and I needed to be present for it. Destiny stopped calling around 12:30. The silence that followed was different from the silence before. Before, it had been the silence of preparation. Now, it was the silence of understanding. She had finally comprehended what I had actually done. She had stopped trying to convince me to take the listing down because she understood that taking it down was no longer an option I was willing to consider. By 1 o'clock, I had 7 bookings in various stages of confirmation. By 2 o'clock, I had 9. By 3 o'clock, I had 12. The calculator in my head was running constantly. 12 bookings at different rates, different lengths of stay, different seasons. Somewhere between these bookings and the ones that would come in the following weeks and months, there was $9,900. Somewhere in this stream of strangers willing to pay to sleep in a room designed by a young woman who refused to pay to live in it. There was my recovery. I looked at the notebook one more time. The record of missed payments. The record of the demand letter. The record of Destiny's calls. The record of the moment I decided to act. All of it was there. Documented, time-stamped, precise. All of it was the evidence of what had led me to this kitchen table, this laptop, this moment of watching strangers book a room, and not knowing that they were, in fact, helping a woman reclaim her financial life from a daughter who had decided she was entitled to it indefinitely. The coffee was completely cold now. I picked it up and poured it down the sink and rinsed the mug. Then I sat back down at the laptop and I started writing confirmation messages to the guests who had booked. I thanked them for choosing room 1B. I told them I was excited to welcome them. I gave them the details they needed. And with each message I sent, I felt the weight of the past 9 months lift just slightly, replaced by something colder and clearer, the understanding that I had done what I said I would do, and that there was no going back. Patricia Holloway's review posted on a Sunday morning. 5 stars. The photo she had chosen as her cover image was the velvet headboard in yellow light. The way the morning sun caught the deep wine colour and made it glow like something precious. The way the gallery wall caught the light behind it. The way the whole room looked like something curated for exactly this moment. For a stranger to walk in, see it, and decide it was worth travelling for. Her written review was brief. The most photogenic bedroom I have ever paid to sleep in. Every detail matters here. The host clearly understands aesthetic and intentionality. I will absolutely be back. That was all it took. 1 5-star review from someone with 47 previous 5-star reviews. Someone whose judgment mattered because she had no stake in the outcome. Someone who could validate the space without knowing anything about the cost it had required to create it. By Tuesday, 2 more bookings came through. By Wednesday, another one. By Friday, the dashboard showed a running total of $2,590. That was 2 months of Destiny's rent. That was progress. I was standing in the doorway of the room on a Friday afternoon when the final booking for that week came through. The room was between guests. Patricia had checked out that morning, and the next guest was not arriving until the following Wednesday. I'd stripped the bed, washed the sheets, reset everything exactly as it had been before Patricia arrived. The eucalyptus reed diffuser was plugged back in, cycling through its slow progression of amber to white to amber again. The gallery wall was still hung exactly as Destiny had arranged it months ago. Every print perfectly positioned, every frame at exactly the right angle. Nothing had changed except that now, every few days, a stranger paid to sleep here, paid to photograph it, paid to validate that this space was worth the money. I stood in the doorway and I thought about my mother, Eunice May Watkins. She had been gone for 6 years. She had died on a Tuesday in March, and I had sat in a hospital room and held her hand and listened to her breathing change from laboured to shallow to finally stopping altogether. At the funeral, people had come up to me and said things like, "She was a strong woman and she raised you right." But what they did not understand was that most of what my mother had taught me was through sayings, through small pieces of wisdom that she had delivered in passing, in kitchens, in hallways, in moments when I was not even sure I was paying attention. There was one saying in particular that came back to me standing in that doorway. She had said it when I was maybe 20 years old, when I was still figuring out how to be in the world, still learning which parts of myself to offer and which parts to protect. She had said, "A closed hand can't give and can't receive, but you need to know when to open and when to make a fist." For 20 years, I had been practicing the first part. I had opened my hand. I had given. I had received what my daughter offered and what she did not offer, and I had accepted it as the price of motherhood. I had opened myself to her needs, her wants, her ambitions, and I had let them be absorbed into my life without question. I had been the kind of mother who gave without asking for anything in return. And I had believed that was what love looked like. Standing in that doorway, with Patricia Holloway's 5-star review still glowing on my phone in my pocket, with the knowledge that $2,590 was already moving through the system toward my account, I said my mother's saying aloud, into the quiet room for the first time since her funeral. A closed hand can't give and can't receive. But you need to know when to open and when to make a fist. And I understood, finally, which half my mother had been teaching me all along. She had not been teaching me how to open. I had learned that on my own, and perhaps too well. What she had been teaching me was the other half, the part about knowing when to make a fist, not to harm anyone, not to be cruel, but to protect myself, to understand that my own survival was not a betrayal of love, to know that sometimes the most important thing a mother can do is close her hand around her own future and refuse to let it be taken. Destiny's 30 days were up on September 30th. She had not paid. She had not moved out. By October 14th, when I published the listing, she had been in violation of the agreement for 2 weeks, and the formal demand letter had been delivered, certified mail, with the understanding that the next step was eviction. She chose to leave 3 days after the listing went live, and she took with her only what fit in her car: clothes, some electronics, the things that mattered to her personally. The furniture stayed, the gallery wall stayed, the room stayed. Every few days, a new guest arrived. Every few days, someone paid to sleep in the space that Destiny had designed but refused to pay for. Every payout that cleared, every 5-star review that posted, every booking that confirmed, these were not revenge. They were recovery. They were the slow, methodical reclamation of what had been taken from me, not through violence or vindication, but through the simple act of converting a space into its actual value and letting the market do what destiny would not. Pay! I closed the door of the freshly made room and went downstairs to the kitchen. The payout from Patricia's stay had cleared that morning. $1,295. I stood at the counter with my coffee. 2 sugars. No cream. The way I had been drinking it for 40 years. And I looked at the number on my phone, and I understood that I was going to be okay. That I had made the right choice. That my mother had known all those years ago that there would come a day when I would need to know the difference between the hand that gives and the hand that protects.